The night I got engaged was supposed to be the happiest night of my life. Instead, it nearly became a crime scene, not because of a jealous ex, not because of a stranger, but because of my mother and a single glass of red wine. Welcome to Karma Encrypted, where true stories of betrayal and revenge are told with raw truth and quiet fire. If you haven't subscribed yet, now's the time. These stories aren't just dramatic. They're real. And the one you're about to hear might just make you rethink who you trust, even in your own family. Let's begin. Let me take you back to the moment I knew something was wrong. The glass was cool in my hand, delicate, heavier than most wine glasses I'd used. My mother had handed it to me with a strange, almost forced smile. "To your next chapter," she said. Her voice was syrupy sweet. Her eyes, cold, calculated. And the moment I raised the glass to my lips, something stopped me. The smell. It was red wine, yes. But behind the tannins, the oaky finish, there was something else. Something metallic. Bitter. Faint, but wrong. So I made a decision I didn't think twice about at the time. I handed it to my little sister, Lily. My name is Ava. I'm 26 years old, and I just got engaged to the love of my life, Jordan. He's steady, kind, the kind of man who doesn't just remember birthdays. He remembers how you take your coffee when you're too tired to make it. We met at a charity run, bonded over our mutual hatred of networking events, and spent 3 years building a life together. When he proposed, it was quiet, meaningful, just the two of us, under a tree in the park where we had our first real conversation. It was perfect. So, of course, I should have known something would go wrong the moment we invited my mother to help plan the engagement party. My relationship with my mom has always been complicated. She's what people politely call a strong personality. What I call a manipulator with a talent for masking cruelty as care. Growing up, she controlled everything. What I wore, who I befriended, what I studied. She had a script for my life. And when I started rewriting it, she didn't take it well, especially when I said no to law school, especially when I moved in with Jordan before marriage, especially when I said yes to a man she hadn't pre-approved. She smiled through it, but that smile, it always felt like a trap. The party was at a cozy rooftop lounge Jordan rented out for the evening. String lights hung from wooden beams. Jazz music floated through the air, and a mild breeze carried the smell of grilled hors d'oeuvres. Jordan was off entertaining his cousins. I was near the bar chatting with Lily and my best friend, Mia. That's when my mom appeared, glass in hand. "Here," she said. "Thought you could use a drink." I took it automatically. "Habit." She hovered for a moment, watching me, then drifted away without a word. It was odd, but not nearly as odd as the smell in the glass. It wasn't strong. In fact, it was subtle enough that most people wouldn't notice. But I don't drink often, and this wasn't just wine. Something felt off. I turned to Lily, who was flipping through party photos on her phone. "Want this? I think I'll get something lighter." She took it without looking up and sipped. It happened slowly at first. 5 minutes later, she said she felt weird. 10 minutes later, she said her head was spinning. 15 minutes later, she collapsed. Chaos. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. Mia dropped her purse and lunged toward Lily. Jordan appeared out of nowhere, kneeling beside my sister. Someone called 911. My mother? She didn't move. She didn't scream. She didn't rush to Lily's side. She just stood there, watching, expression unreadable. At the ER, they ran toxicology. The diagnosis? Acute reaction to a sedative. Not alcohol poisoning. Not an allergy. A foreign agent. Introduced in liquid form. A specific sedative. One used in small animal surgeries, difficult to trace, nearly tasteless, almost undetectable in red wine. It could cause drowsiness, loss of coordination, and, in higher doses, unconsciousness or worse. Lily had been lucky. The dose was small, but the intention, that's what chilled me. The wine bottle my mother used was confiscated. It wasn't from the venue. She had brought it herself, a gift she'd said earlier. Nobody else had touched it, not the caterers, not the bartenders, just her. And the glass, identical to the ones at the party, except for one thing, a faint, unusual residue near the rim, likely from handling with gloves or a cloth. I didn't confront her until 2 days later. I waited until I could look her in the eye without screaming. We sat in her pristine kitchen, marble counters, a lemon-scented candle burning like everything was normal. I slid the hospital report across the table. Care to explain? She didn't flinch, just sipped her tea. Explain what? Lily could have died. Then you shouldn't have handed her your drink. My blood ran cold, so it was for me. She looked at me, finally, and smiled. You've always been dramatic, Ava. Maybe it was just bad wine. I stood up. You're not coming to the wedding. You're not contacting me again. You're done. She didn't stop me, didn't plead, just said one final thing as I reached the door. You think love is enough, but you'll learn. You always do the hard way. That night, I sat beside Lily's bed while she slept off what was left of the sedative, and I made a decision. This wasn't going to end with a blocked number and a canceled invite. This wasn't going to be another chapter in her long history of silent sabotage. She wanted me broken. She wanted me fearful. Instead, I was going to show her what happened when the daughter she tried to erase learned to fight back. She didn't try to kill me because she hated me. She did it because I stopped being someone she could control. After the incident with the wine, I didn't sleep for days. Not because I was afraid my mom would come back. She wouldn't dare, not after the ER report, the quiet police inquiry, and Jordan firmly telling her she was barred from our wedding. No, I didn't sleep because the silence after the chaos was worse than the chaos itself. Every time I closed my eyes, I didn't see the glass. I saw my mother's face, cold, smiling, almost proud. I kept asking myself, why? Why would my own mother, the woman who'd carried me for 9 months, who fed me when I had the flu, who used to braid my hair every morning, hand me a poisoned glass of wine? Not metaphorically, literally. I needed to know, not just to satisfy my fear, but to sharpen it. I knew I couldn't move on, couldn't even marry Jordan, if I didn't understand the root of what she did. So I started digging, and what I found explained everything and shattered everything, too. My first call was to my Aunt Teresa. She's my mom's older sister, 6 years her senior, twice divorced, childless by choice, and the only person in my family who ever told me to think for myself. She always had a strange distance from my mom, but she never spoke on it. Until now. I called her on a Thursday afternoon and didn't waste time. Did something happen between you and Mom? Something bad. There was a long pause, a sigh. Then, she told me you gave Lily the wine. My stomach turned. She's still lying? Always has. I waited. She tried something, didn't she? Teresa asked quietly. Yes. And you're finally ready to hear it. That's when she told me the story. My mother, Elaine, didn't grow up with power. She married into it. My father's family was wealthy, conservative, reputation-driven. When they picked her as suitable, she played the role perfectly, elegant, soft-spoken, the good housewife who didn't ask questions. But what no one knew was that she'd grown up in chaos. Her own father was controlling. Her mother was passive and numb. Teresa said my mom learned early that if you couldn't be the strongest, you had to be the smartest, the manipulator, the puppet master. It started small, lies to neighbors, emotional games with boyfriends. But by the time she married my father, manipulation was second nature to her. She didn't love your dad, Teresa said. She loved the status. So why did she have us? Because it made her look complete. It all clicked. Her obsession with perfection. Her disapproval when I chose an art major instead of pre-law. The way she'd ice me out for weeks if I disobeyed her in public. But there was one part one didn't expect. There was another child. Teresa said slowly, "Before you." My breath caught. What? A boy. Stillborn, officially. Officially? Teresa's voice broke for the first time. He was born with a rare condition. They told your mom it was genetic and that any future child could carry the trait. She refused to tell your dad, faked the records, swore me to secrecy. So she kept having kids because she needed an heir that looked good on paper. That's you. I sat there in shock. My life, my body had been a performance piece, a symbol of her restored narrative, until I ruined it by falling in love on my own terms. That's when I realized the motive. She didn't want me dead. She wanted me off course. If I ended up hospitalized, humiliated, branded unstable, or reckless at my own engagement party, maybe Jordan would get scared. Maybe his family would second-guess me. Maybe I'd start questioning myself again. That's what the sedative was about. Not to kill me, to erase me as a credible woman, a future wife, a daughter worth honoring. The more I thought about it, the more furious I became. She had waged a psychological war on me my entire life. This wasn't just about a wine glass. It was about control. And she had finally crossed a line she couldn't uncross. So I began my plan. Not revenge in the traditional sense. No shouting matches. No public confrontations. Just exposure. One layer at a time. First, I gathered evidence. I filed a formal police complaint, even though I knew she'd likely slither out of legal consequences. Still, it created a record. Then I spoke to my mom's old bridge group, the women she liked to impress with stories of her perfect family. One of them, Paula, mentioned my mother had bragged that she was guiding Ava back toward more stable choices. Stable. Code for obedient. Paula didn't know about the incident. Yet. But I let her know gently. A few days later, I heard my mother had been quietly uninvited from the group's annual trip. Strike one. Then I made a private post on Facebook. I didn't name names, but I detailed what it's like to be raised by a narcissist, what it feels like to always be told your instincts are overreactions, how gaslighting can come from behind a smile. The post went viral. Thousands of shares, hundreds of DMs. Among them, a message from one of her former coworkers from years ago, a woman named Jean. "Elaine did this to me, too," she wrote. "Only I was just a coworker threatening her status. I lost my job over her lies. The web was bigger than I thought." Strike two. But strike three, that came when I found her therapist, or rather, the one she sent me to when I was 17 to fix my attitude. Turns out, my mom used the same clinic years earlier. And while the exact therapist couldn't comment on her case, they confirmed she had been involved in behavioral counseling related to control patterns and family boundary issues. I asked, "Does she have a diagnosis?" The woman hesitated. "I can't confirm that without consent, but I can say narcissistic tendencies were documented across multiple sessions." That was enough for me. I compiled everything: the ER reports, statements, the toxicology, the pattern of behavior, the testimonies, and created a digital archive. I sent it to every family member who ever believed her. Every cousin she tried to turn against me. Every aunt who thought I was too sensitive. No rage. No threats. Just truth. Cold, undeniable truth. The fallout was swift. She wasn't disowned. Narcissists rarely are, but the respect she weaponized, gone. She wasn't the perfect matriarch anymore. She was the woman who drugged her own daughter. And now, she was powerless. Jordan and I moved forward with the wedding. Lily gave a speech that made the entire room cry. Mia told me afterward, "I've never seen you stand taller." And me, I stood at that altar free, not because I escaped my mother, but because I survived her. There's a certain kind of silence that happens when someone's image collapses. It's not the kind of silence you hear. It's the kind you feel, like the crack of a foundation under too much weight, like something sacred, or at least convincing, finally breaking. And when my mother's mask slipped, that silence followed her like a shadow. It started with an invitation, not from her, from me, to my bridal shower. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why would I invite the woman who tried to drug me? Simple. Because narcissists don't disappear when they lose control, they scramble to regain it. And my mother? She couldn't resist a stage. So I gave her one. A stage dressed in white and gold. A beautiful garden brunch. Dozens of family members and longtime friends she'd manipulated for years. And one microphone. She RSVP'd immediately, of course. Can't wait to celebrate my baby girl. Right. The same baby girl she tried to sedate 2 months earlier. She didn't ask questions. Didn't apologize. She probably thought I'd come to my senses, that the wedding glow softened me. She didn't know the shower was a setup, one designed not just for closure, but for exposure. And I wasn't going to raise my voice. I wasn't going to accuse her in a fit of rage. I was going to let the facts do the talking. Jordan helped me set it up. He was hesitant at first, worried it would backfire, that I'd spiral from being around her again. But this wasn't about vengeance. It was about reclaiming power, telling my story on my terms, not hers. So we prepped everything. The venue, booked at a beautiful botanical garden she used to boast about belonging to. The guest list, full of people she either lied to or pressured over the years. The speech, written carefully, a blend of truth, restraint, and impact. The day of the shower arrived with perfect weather. Blue skies, calm breeze, peaceful surroundings. And then she arrived, hairstyled to perfection, wearing white, bold move for someone not getting married. With a designer clutch and her usual air of importance, she made the rounds, air-kissing cheeks, and pretending nothing had happened. When she hugged me, I let it happen. Brief. "Chilly. You look beautiful," she said. "Thanks," I replied. "So glad you could make it." She smiled, sensing victory. She thought she'd won me back. Then the real party began. Mimosas poured. Toasts were made. Laughter filled the air. And then it was my turn to speak. I walked to the mic and took a deep breath. I want to thank everyone for coming today. This has been the most beautiful season of my life, but also the most revealing. The crowd quieted. I could feel her watching me, still smiling, still posing. When we think of weddings, we think of love, of commitment, of partnership. But before you can commit to someone else, you have to free yourself from the people who've been quietly holding you down. I paused. For years, I struggled to understand why I doubted myself so much, why I questioned my choices, my relationships, even my sanity. Murmurs. Then, one night at my engagement party, I was handed a glass of wine. Now, it was dead silent. It smelled off, so I gave it to someone else. Her smile cracked. That person collapsed minutes later. Gasps. I looked straight at her. The toxicology report confirmed there was a sedative in that glass. A calculated dosage. Just enough to disorient. Just enough to discredit. Just enough to destroy trust. A few guests turned toward her. She looked frozen, pale. I was raised by someone who taught me to doubt my instincts, to believe that control was care, that silence was safety. More whispers now. But I'm done being silent. I smiled and ended with this. This is not a story of bitterness. It's a story of boundaries, of truth, and of becoming the kind of woman who chooses her future, not one who's shaped by fear. Applause. From some, stunned silence from others. But I didn't need everyone's approval. I only needed myself. She left without saying goodbye. Didn't speak to a soul. Didn't even touch the lemon tarts she used to brag about baking better. And from that day forward, her name stopped carrying power in our family. Relatives stopped asking, "Have you talked to your mom?" They started asking, "How are you healing?" 3 weeks later, I got a letter. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. "You'll regret making me your villain. One day, you'll understand I was protecting you." Classic. No apology. No accountability. Just one last grasp at control. I didn't respond. Instead, I burned it in the same fire pit Jordan, and I use every Sunday night. It turned to ash in seconds. But the story doesn't end there. Because 2 days after the bridal shower, I got a phone call that changed everything. A man, nervous, said he used to work at my father's firm. "I don't know if you remember me, but I think we should talk. It's about your mother, and something she did years ago that you might not know about. Some betrayals feel like cuts. Quick, sharp. You bleed, then scar. But others, they're like landmines. You don't know they're there until they blow your whole world apart. This was one of those." The man on the phone said he used to work with my father. He gave only a first name, Alan, and said he used to handle financial audits for the firm where my dad was a senior partner. He told me he'd been at my father's funeral years ago, that he remembered me, the quiet one who wouldn't stop clenching her fists. Accurate. "I wasn't going to call," he said, "but after what happened with your mother, well, I figured you had a right to know." To know what? That was the question that wouldn't let me sleep. We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, a public place, just in case. I didn't tell anyone where I was going, not even Jordan. Not until afterward. Alan was already there when I arrived, mid-60s, neatly dressed, nervous energy. He introduced himself, and we ordered coffee. Then, without much preamble, he said, "Your mother forged your father's signature on a trust document a year before he died." My stomach dropped. What trust? The one set up for you and Lily. It turns out my dad had quietly set aside a 7-figure inheritance for Lily and me, under the condition that it be locked until we turned 30 or got married. He wanted us to have freedom, security, something separate from the family business. But a year before he died, during what we thought was just a mild illness, my mom brought paperwork to the firm, said he'd updated his wishes. On the surface, the change looked small. She'd been made co-executor in case of incapacity. But the fine print, it gave her control over when we received the money. And she used that control to keep us tied to her, financially, emotionally, legally. We suspected something, Alan said, but she was persuasive. And your father, well, he wasn't in any state to argue. You mean he was already sick? Dementia? Early stage. He hid it well. I sat there in silence, processing. This woman, my mother, didn't just control my present. She had stolen my future. And Lily's. We always wondered why the trust never matured. Why the lawyer's office dodged our questions. Why the conditions seemed to keep changing. It was her. All of it. Why are you telling me now? I asked, Alan looked down at his coffee. Because I couldn't live with the guilt anymore. I have a daughter. If someone did to her what your mother did to you. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. I thanked him and walked out in a daze. The inheritance, the delay, the constant disapproval of my marriage, of me becoming independent. She hadn't just been sabotaging me emotionally. She'd been strategically cutting off my autonomy. The wine at the engagement party wasn't her first move. It was her last, a desperate act by someone who realized their web was unraveling. When I got home, I opened my old files. Letters, estate plans, emails from the trust lawyer, and suddenly everything made sense. The lawyer had always been her friend. She handled every document, every signature request, every delay. She even insisted I give her power of attorney when I turned 18, just in case something happened. I had forgotten about that. Now, it felt like a trap I'd walked into blind. But I wasn't blind anymore, and I wasn't about to let her steal a future my father meant for me to have. So I made a call to a woman named Nadine. She wasn't just a lawyer. She was a forensic estate litigator, the kind who specializes in digging up the truth behind revised documents and family betrayals. Her reputation? Ruthless, discreet, efficient. I told her everything. She listened silently. Then she asked me one question. Are you ready for what happens if we win? I knew what she meant. If we prove the forgery, my mother wouldn't just lose access to the trust. She could face criminal charges. She could lose her house. She could lose everything. I said yes, not because I wanted revenge, but because I wanted justice. For myself, for Lily, for the version of my father who had quietly tried to protect us from the very woman who claimed to love us most. The investigation began quietly. Nadine filed for a subpoena on the original trust documents. Alan agreed to give a statement under seal, and slowly, like a map unfolding, the forgery became undeniable. The signature wasn't just suspicious. It had been digitally copied from a prior document and layered onto the amendment. My mother hadn't even bothered to disguise it well. She assumed no one would ever question her. She was wrong. But the biggest twist, it came when Nadine found a second trust, one not filed through my mother's legal contacts, one created before the forged version, held in a private vault. My father had created it in secret, and in that version, he named me the sole executor. I broke down when I read it, because it meant he knew. He knew what she was capable of, and he tried to protect us the only way he could, by hiding the truth in plain sight. But he didn't live long enough to tell me. By the end of the month, Nadine had filed the case. The court date was set, and my mother, she was served at her country club in front of her friends. Witnesses say she turned white as a ghost, didn't say a word, just folded the papers, stood up, and walked out. But I wasn't done, because there was still one more person who needed to know the truth. Lily, she came over that weekend, bringing muffins and her usual sunshine energy, completely unaware of what I'd uncovered. When I told her everything, she went silent. Then she cried, not because of the money, because of what it meant. She never loved us, Lily whispered. Not really. I held her for a long time. Then I said the only thing I could. Maybe not the way we needed, but we're not her anymore. It's one thing to know someone is a liar. It's another to watch them swear on a Bible in open court, look a judge in the eye, and commit perjury with the calm of someone ordering tea. That's when I knew. My mother didn't just lie to me. She believed her lies were truth, because in her mind, the story she told herself was the only story that mattered. But that day, her narrative died, and I made sure it died loudly. The courtroom was modest, bare wood benches, fluorescent lighting, and the faint smell of floor polish. But to me, it felt like a cathedral. This was where it would all come out. The trust, the signature, the forged control over my future, the poisoning attempt, everything. Jordan sat beside me, holding my hand. Lily was behind me, her fingers nervously twisting a bracelet I bought her in high school. Nadine, my lawyer, stood like a calm storm ready to break. And then my mother walked in. Perfect posture, navy dress, pearl earrings, her face as unreadable as stone. She didn't look at me. Not once. The case was clear on paper. Forgery of an estate document, breach of fiduciary responsibility, fraudulent use of power of attorney. But underneath that was the battle she didn't expect. Me, unafraid. Nadine began with the facts. The original trust, the amendment, the digital signature overlays, Alan's sworn affidavit, the suppressed second trust that named me executor. It was meticulous, cold, precise. My mother sat expressionless the whole time, eyes locked straight ahead like none of it applied to her. Then her lawyer stood, some slick, overly confident man named Reed, who tried to frame her as a concerned mother acting in the best interest of her daughters. Right, because slipping sedatives into wine screams maternal love. Then came the moment I was called to testify. I stepped up, placed my hand on the Bible, and swore. I told the story in full. The wine, the engagement party, the moment I knew the smell wasn't right, the ER, the toxicology report, the years of emotional control, the inheritance, the silence after I confronted her, and the letter. Why are you pursuing this now? Her lawyer asked during cross. I looked at him squarely. Because my future was taken from me. My father tried to protect me, and she rewrote his wishes. This isn't revenge. It's restoration. He scoffed. Restoration implies something was lost. You were never financially harmed. I didn't flinch. Control is harm. Gaslighting is harm. Telling a child they're overreacting while stealing their autonomy is harm. Silence. Then my mother took the stand, and I'll never forget what she said. I didn't forge anything. My husband gave me authority. He wanted me to have control. Ava always made impulsive choices. I was safeguarding what he built. Do you deny altering the trust language? Nadine asked. Yes. Do you deny blocking your daughter's access to their inheritance? It was for their own good. Ava was going to marry someone I hadn't approved. She needed structure. Did you or did you not hand your daughter a glass of wine at her engagement party? A pause. I offered her a toast. That's all. That wine contained a sedative. If it did, I had no idea. I watched her closely. No flinch. No tremble. Not even a blink. Just calm, calculated denial. Like this was all theater and she had the script memorized. But Nadine wasn't done. Exhibit 47, she said, placing a document on the table. A notarized statement. From Jean, the co-worker my mom ruined years ago. It detailed how my mother had altered documents before, used emotional manipulation to climb ranks, created false narratives to frame colleagues. And that was the final crack. The judge requested a recess to review. My mother stepped down, and as she walked past me, she finally looked me in the eye. For just 1 second, her lips parted slightly, as if to say something. But no sound came out. She just kept walking. Later that afternoon, the ruling was delivered. The court found the amended trust to be fraudulent. The second trust, the one my father hid, was reinstated. My mother was removed as co-executor. I was granted full authority over the estate. Criminal proceedings were recommended to the DA's office. But more than that, she was exposed. When we left the courthouse, reporters had already picked up the story. Woman accused of drugging daughter at engagement party loses inheritance case. Former society hostess faces fraud allegations from own children. I didn't speak to press. I didn't gloat. But that night, I opened a bottle of wine, one I poured myself, and toasted with Lily and Jordan in silence. I thought that was the end. But 2 days later, I received a manila envelope. No note, no return address. Inside, a photo of me as a child, smiling, in my father's lap, and on the back, a scribbled message in handwriting I hadn't seen in over a decade. She tried to ruin you, but you are not broken. You are fire. Keep burning. It was my dad's writing, but the envelope was recent, which means someone held on to it. Someone waited until the trial was over to send it. And suddenly, I had one question burning louder than the rest. Who else knew all along? Revenge isn't always fire and fury. Sometimes it's quiet, a long breath, a door that finally shuts. But just as I was ready to close it, to move forward, to let it all rest, a knock came, soft, intentional, and carrying the one thing I thought I'd already lost. Answers. The photo had been sent anonymously, my younger self smiling in my dad's arms, years before everything twisted. But it wasn't the image that haunted me. It was the handwriting on the back. She tried to ruin you, but you are not broken. You are fire. Keep burning. It was my father's handwriting. I would have known it anywhere. And that message, it wasn't something a child's drawing would have carried. It was deliberate, timed, meant for this moment. Someone had saved it, and someone had waited. At first, I thought it might have been a former colleague of his. Or maybe Alan, the man who tipped me off in the first place. But neither of them would have had this photo. Not one this personal. I called Alan. He denied sending it. Sounded genuinely confused. So I did something I never thought I'd do again. I visited the house I grew up in. My mother was no longer living there. After the court ruling, she'd moved into a smaller condo on the other side of town. For privacy, though we both knew it was exile. But the house, it was still owned by the estate. By me. Walking through it was like stepping into a curated museum of dysfunction. Perfectly staged. Chillingly cold. But as I walked the halls, I realized something. There were no photos of me past the age of 16. No graduation shots. No prom. No early college. As if I'd stopped existing the moment I started becoming myself. It was a shrine to her version of motherhood, not to us. But then I saw it. The attic. We were never allowed up there growing up. My mom said it was unstable, full of dust, dangerous. But the door opened easily now. Inside, it was dusty, yes, but not dangerous. And at the far end of the space, behind a covered trunk, was a locked box. Small, wooden, familiar. It had my father's initials etched into the corner. RH. The key wasn't hard to find. It was in the back of my mother's old sewing kit, inside the very drawer she'd once slapped my hand for touching. The box opened with a quiet click. Inside were 3 things: a folded letter, a USB drive, a small velvet pouch. I opened the letter first, and with shaking hands, read my father's words. Ava, if you're reading this, it means you've already begun the process of untangling what I couldn't fix. I want you to know I saw it. I saw what she did to you, how she clipped your wings behind a smile. I was too weak to stop her, but I left this because I knew you wouldn't be. The pouch contains a key, not just a physical one. You'll know what to do. The drive? It holds everything. My records, my private files, evidence I collected but never used. Protect your sister and yourself, and don't let her rewrite the ending. Dad, I didn't cry. I burned with love for the man who'd tried, quietly and invisibly, to save his daughters from the one person he couldn't confront, and burned with rage that he'd been forced into silence. The pouch contained a key, small and gold. It matched nothing in the house. So I plugged in the USB. Inside were dozens of encrypted files, but one folder was clearly labeled Redemption. Inside that, video clips, email screenshots, voicemail recordings, financial documents, all compiled over months, maybe years. There was even a recording of a session between him and a therapist. She doesn't see them as people, he said. She sees them as extensions of her image. I'm afraid of what happens when they stop performing. I stopped the playback. It was too much, too real. One file was labeled, Bank Box, Safe Deposit, Vault 117. I knew the bank. It was downtown. That was where the key led. The next morning, I went. The manager at the bank pulled up the records, confirmed that Box 117 had been leased in my father's name, set to release access to either me or Lily after his passing. But the information had been misfiled. I didn't need to guess who orchestrated that. He handed me the box, and inside, a printed legal document, a separate insurance policy, a video will. In it, my father sat behind his desk, looking pale but composed. Ava, if you're seeing this, I'm sorry. For everything I didn't do, for the silence, for staying married when I should have walked away. You deserve the truth. Elaine lied. She manipulated the trust. She isolated me. She threatened to discredit me if I spoke. But you were always watching, and I knew you'd never let it stay buried. I believe in you, even when I couldn't say it out loud. I showed Lily the video that night. She sobbed harder than I've ever seen her cry. We sat on my couch, holding each other, surrounded by years of damage, and finally, some light. 3 months later, the court closed the criminal investigation. My mother pled no contest to avoid trial. She forfeited all remaining estate claims, paid restitution, was barred from managing any future family trusts. She tried to reach out once, sent a letter to Lily. Lily mailed it back unopened. We didn't hear from her again. Jordan and I got married in a quiet ceremony by the lake. Lily walked me down the aisle. We toasted with red wine, the same brand I was given at the engagement party. Only this time, I poured every glass myself. I kept my father's letter in my nightstand. Sometimes I reread the last line before bed. Don't let her rewrite the ending. I didn't. I wrote my own. And this is the story.